Although you might infer this antagonistic title to likely be a form of satire or trolling, I am in fact being quite serious, and a tiny bit satirical. Battlefield 1 is the best Call of Duty ever made. I will explain why in this video. To do this, we must first establish how Battlefield 1 successfully fulfills the criteria befitting of a Call of Duty title. Those criteria being extremely fast-paced, clustered or small map design which flows players straight forward or in circles, and generally brainless gameplay. BF1 is indeed very fast-paced. Soldiers zip around the map with unlimited sprint, change movement direction instantly without any regard for inertia, and all possess masterful parkour skills so that most environmental objects dare not inconvenience the player to take pesky actions such as turning left or right while moving. As we all know, the only time a player should have to do this is when they are aiming their weapon to get those sweet, sweet kills. Weapons are easy and fast to use, faster to aim, ammunition and explosions are plentiful, fast to restock, and the vast majority of animations play out as if the soldier were on performance-enhancing drugs. Of course, in Call of Duty, such player movement speed has been necessary to achieve this, as the modern adaptations do not feature any other means of transport. If Battlefield had vehicles the player could use as transport, then such inhuman speedy soldiers wouldn't be When speaking of map design, I will only be considering Conquest, which has been the staple game mode of Battlefield since the beginning, although the upcoming observations can be comfortably applied to the other game types that haven't already been directly ripped from Call of Duty. And here, despite the larger sizes, they have done a stellar job encouraging that one-dimensional gameplay we all know and love from COD. A huge majority of the maps feature objectives placed in a nice and simple straight line, or on a median line with each objective only slightly deviated. If not in a straight line, then they are clustered together within arm's length of one another, placed carefully so that there is only one clear choice of which objective to move to next. Any attempt at flanking around or sneaking to a rear objective is usually incredibly difficult, owing to any divergent paths almost always being in a highly exposed, completely open space in clear view of the enemy. On the rare occasion that there are deviant objectives placed away from the clustered group and further than 250 meters, such as on Sinai Desert, then said objective will be completely exposed and undesirable, ensuring most players remain where the developers want them to be. The end result is a continuous assortment of meat grinder choke points between each flag, flowing from one to the other in the most predictable and calculated of ways, akin to the algorithmic design of Call of Duty's maps. Great job, developers. The final and arguably most important criteria Battlefield 1 needs to satisfy in order to cement itself as a Call of Duty-esque game is brainless, twitch-reflex-based gameplay. But what makes a game brainless exactly? Well, my definition would be a game that actively works to limit or prevent player decision-making and required use of senses beyond bare minimum basic actions, such as looking, moving, and shooting. This can be achieved by either automating processes within the game that require any more than base instinct interaction, or by just removing the process from the game outright. Battlefield 1 successfully attains brainless gameplay, and relies mainly on the former to do so. Here are examples of just some of the ways they have done this. 3D spotting. It removes the need to carefully watch your environment for enemies. A player need only shoot at the floating red symbols instead, even through visual obstructions such as smoke or flares. Icons. All friendly soldiers are highlighted with a lovely blue icon, so the player need not concern themselves with the pesky act of using their eyes to identify uniforms. Weapons. Blah blah weapons that all feel roughly the same except for fire rate and are blah. No friendly fire. This is completely disabled by default, so the player need not have to consider their positioning and use of offensive actions and may spam explosions and weapon fire at their leisure, consequence and thought-free. Communicating. Besides berating and insulting one another's mothers, communication plays no part in Call of Duty. Battlefield 1 has managed this too, despite being a large-scale team-based game. Manual communication is no longer required to ask for supplies, as friendly hell states float conveniently above the soldier's head. Vehicles can be spawned in automatically, negating the need to ask for a ride. You need not even go to the effort of showing gratitude towards your comrades anymore. The game will automate that for you too. How nice. The end result is players barely paying attention to one another, and any attempt at communication will largely be left unnoticed. Excellent work again, developers. The player can self-repair vehicles, meaning you'll further never have to rely on your teammates for support, let alone the huge inconvenience of attempted communication. Grenade icons show exactly where they are coming from and how close you are to them. God forbid the player be asked to pay attention to their surroundings beyond what is in front of them to shoot. The game even auto-leans corners for you. As we all know, manually performing this action is too strenuous for all but the most battle-hardened brain to handle, especially when having to look, move, and shoot, sometimes all at once. The aforementioned map design and objective placement also help contribute greatly to the mindlessness. It's difficult to look for enemies when they're not immediately in front of you or around an obvious highlighted location, so the few alternative routes that are highly exposed or completely open make sighting and spotting nice and easy and thought-free. Our brains are fickle, impatient, and demanding things, and it's difficult to pay attention and stay interested in a game when we have to spend more than a minute not shooting or being around lots of explosions. We just can't stand not being constantly stimulated, and thus we've no choice in this situation but to check social media on our mobile devices, which are usually sitting under the computer screens within immediate glance, to ensure our next dopamine fix no matter what. Luckily, the designers were aware of this by graciously placing each flag within a stone's throw of one another, ensuring a constant flow of action to keep our infantile brains entertained with the task at hand. The map design elements of larger maps further show their foresight and brilliance. A player that wanders off the predetermined path will always be visible to enemy planes, in line of sight of snipers and whatever else, so that they're constantly spotted, shot at, and bombed at regular intervals, so the player is kept excited and away from the allure of other distractions, like their smartphones, no matter where they might be. All this considered and combined together, Battlefield 1 firmly qualifies as a brainless Call of Duty-like experience. But what makes it quite possibly the best Call of Duty experience to date is the expanded scale of one-dimensional gameplay it offers in comparison to its inspiration. Much like in Call of Duty, there are a multitude of ways to be killed from all directions without ever having a say in the matter or the killer having to put in any degree of effort. Aerial bombardment from plane and player, stationary heavy emplacements, behemoths, bullet-resistant elite classes, endless grenades, map design and cluttered objectives that ensure you're always marked and being fired on no matter where you are. It's all there, regardless of map size, making sure the action is constant and grating. Never should you dare to try and catch a moment of respite. No self-respecting Call of Duty-esque clone would ever allow this. COD has been lacking many of these additional elements for a long time, and the expanded scale of things to use and map size while still managing to keep the mind-numbingly shallow gameplay would be the logical step forward for the franchise, and one that Battlefield 1 has now accomplished in its place. And so, for these reasons, alongside the later added addition of soldier perks in an even more blatant move to imitate COD, I declare Battlefield 1 to be the best Call of Duty title made to date. Congratulations, especially to the publisher who has been able to nudge the developers towards this profitable pinnacle of intellectual property corruption over the years.